Welcome. This is a calm and very slow journey through the history of ancient Egypt. You do not need to stay awake. You may simply listen and let the words drift by. Close your eyes, allow yourself to breathe slowly. And let us begin with the story of a civilization that rose along the Nile. The Nile River flows slowly across the desert. Every year, the river would flood and leave behind dark, fertile soil. This soil gave life to wheat, barley, vegetables, and fruits. People lived in small houses made of mud bricks. The days were long and hot, the nights cool and silent. Men worked in the fields, women baked bread, children played in the sand. Life moved slowly with the rhythm of the river and the rising and setting of the sun. Far across the sands rose the pyramids, huge triangles of stone built to honor the dead. Each block, heavy, lifted by many hands, slowly, carefully placed one on top of the other. Inside, narrow passageways led to silent chambers. Here, pharaohs were buried with treasures, food, and amulets. Temples, too, stood tall with columns and carvings. Priests lit incense, statues of gods looked on, unmoving, eternal. The desert wind blew softly against stone that has stood for thousands of years. The people of Egypt believed in many gods. Ra, the sun god, traveled across the sky each day. Osiris, lord of the underworld, judged the dead. Isis, the mother goddess, cared for her people. Horus, with the head of a falcon, watched from above. At night, people looked to the stars and wondered about the journey after death. They believed the heart of the dead would be weighed against a feather. If the heart was light, the soul lived forever. If heavy, it was lost. So they lived with faith and quiet devotion. Egypt was ruled by pharaohs. They were seen as both kings and gods. There was Khufu, who built the Great Pyramid. There was Akhenaten, who changed the religion to worship the sun alone. There was Nefertiti, remembered for her beauty. And there was Tutankhamun, the boy king, whose tomb was filled with gold. Later came Cleopatra, the last queen, who spoke many languages and ruled with charm and strength. Each ruler left behind monuments, statues, carvings that still stand in silence today. Most people in Egypt were farmers. Some were craftsmen, making pottery, jewelry, and tools. Scribes carefully wrote on papyrus with reed pens. Soldiers guarded the land and the borders. Meals were simple: bread, beer, onions, dates, and sometimes fish. They ate slowly under the warm evening sky. Families gathered together, told stories, and rested as the desert cooled and the stars shone. Centuries passed, yet Egypt remained. Stone temples stood against time. Carvings on walls spoke of gods, kings, and battles. Papyrus scrolls told stories of medicine, mathematics, and law. Even today, the pyramids rise above the sand. The Nile still flows, and people still wonder about the mysteries of this land. Ancient Egypt is gone, but not forgotten. It lives in memory, in history, and in the quiet rhythm of time itself. Far across the sands, great pyramids rose, stone upon stone, heavy, lifted by many hands, placed carefully, one above another, until the shape was complete. Inside, narrow tunnels, silent passageways led to hidden chambers. Pharaohs were buried here with treasures, food, amulets, everything they would need in the afterlife. Temples stood tall, columns carved with stories. Priests lit incense, The air filled with smoke, gods carved in stone watched in silence. The desert wind blew softly across monuments that have stood for thousands of years. The people believed in many gods. Ra, the sun god, crossing the sky each day. Osiris, ruler of the underworld. Isis, the mother goddess, caring for her people. Horus, the falcon-headed god, watching from above. At night, the stars shone brightly. People wondered what waited after death. They believed the heart of each person would be weighed against a feather. If light, the soul lived forever. If heavy, it was lost. So they lived with faith, with ritual, with devotion. Egypt was ruled by pharaohs. They were both kings and gods. There was Khufu, who built the Great Pyramid. There was Akhenaten, who worshipped only the sun. There was Nefertiti, known for her beauty. There was Tutankhamun, the boy king, whose tomb was filled with gold. And there was Cleopatra, the last queen, who spoke many languages and ruled with strength. Statues of rulers stood tall, carved in stone, unmoving, eternal. Most people were farmers. Some made pottery, some made jewelry, some were scribes. Scribes dipped reed pens in ink and wrote carefully on papyrus. Soldiers guarded the land and marched along the borders. Meals were simple: bread, beer, onions, dates, fish. Families gathered together, told stories, and rested under the evening sky. The desert cooled, the stars shone bright, and the night was calm. Egyptians studied medicine. They used herbs, honey, and oils to heal. They set broken bones, stitched wounds, read the pulse. They studied the sky. They watched the stars, the sun, the moon. They created a calendar, followed the seasons, predicted the floods of the Nile. Knowledge was written on papyrus, guarded in temples, passed from teacher to student. Calmly, patiently, across the centuries. Writing was sacred. Hieroglyphs, pictures carved into stone, each symbol carrying meaning. Scribes worked carefully, line by line. They recorded harvests, taxes, prayers, and laws. Papyrus scrolls filled with words rolled and stored for generations. To write was to preserve memory. And in Egypt, memory was sacred. Egypt traded with distant lands. Caravans crossed the desert, bringing gold, ivory, spices. Ships sailed the sea, carrying grain, linen, papyrus. Merchants spoke many languages. Markets filled with color, with sound, with smell. And when trade ended, silence returned. Only the desert remained. Centuries passed. Egypt was invaded by Persians, by Greeks, by Romans. The old kingdom faded. Temples crumbled. Pyramids weathered in the sand. Yet Egypt lived on. In stories, in monuments, in memory. Even today, the Nile still flows. The pyramids still rise. And the desert wind still whispers softly across the land. Now our journey is ending. You may let go of the words, let go of the thoughts. Drift deeper and deeper into rest. The sands are quiet now. The river is calm, and you may sleep. The river was everything. It gave water, it gave soil, it gave food, and the people knew that without the river there was nothing. They watched carefully each year when the floods came, the water rising, spreading across the land, and then slowly falling, leaving behind rich black soil. In that soil seeds were planted, crops grew tall, and harvests filled the baskets. Families stored grain, baked bread, brewed beer from barley, and lived simply on the gifts of the river. The men guided oxen pulling wooden plows. The women ground grain between stones. Children helped gather vegetables, and the elders sat in the shade, watching, remembering, telling the same stories to the next generation. The rhythm of work never changed. It was always the same, morning to night, season to season, year to year. At night the village was quiet. The stars shone brightly in the sky, and the sound of insects filled the silence. Families sat outside their homes, sharing bread, drinking beer, telling stories. Some spoke of the river, some of the gods, some of ancestors long gone, but all voices were calm, all voices slow, because in the desert night there was no hurry. A clay lamp burned softly, casting a weak glow. Children grew sleepy. Elders spoke less and less, and soon the village was silent, only the stars above and the cool air around. Sleep came easily in such a place, where every day was the same as the last, where tomorrow would bring the same work, the same river, the same life. The people believed in many gods, but belief was not excitement. It was routine, it was duty. A man placed bread before a small shrine. A woman poured beer as an offering. A child repeated the words taught by elders, not thinking, only following. The gods were part of life, as regular as sunrise, as certain as the flood. Ra crossed the sky each day. Osiris waited in the underworld. Isis cared for the family. Horus watched from above. The rituals were repeated, always the same words, always the same gestures, a pattern that stretched for centuries. The sound of priests chanting was low, slow, heavy with incense, heavy with silence. The people did not question, they followed, because to follow was easier than to think, to repeat was safer than to change. Work continued each day. Some men carved stone, shaping blocks, dragging them across sand, stacking them one upon another. The sound of stone on stone echoed in the desert, slow, heavy, endless. Others painted walls, symbols upon symbols, repeating lines, repeating shapes, until the walls were filled, but still the work continued. Some men sat as scribes, dipping reed pens into ink, writing slowly, carefully, always the same signs, always the same records. They wrote of harvests, of taxes, of offerings, of births and deaths. Each word recorded, each line preserved, but always the same, always routine, never changing. To write was to repeat was to exist. The food was simple, bread made from wheat and barley, baked in clay ovens, eaten every day. Beer brewed from barley, drunk every day. Onions, leeks, dates, fish, eaten again and again. Nothing new, nothing surprising, always the same taste, always the same meals. Life was survival, but survival was ordinary, survival was repetition. The people did not seek variety, they sought enough, and enough was always the same. Time passed slowly. The sun rose, the sun set. The river rose, the river fell. Children grew, became adults, grew old, and died, while others were born to repeat the same cycle. Life was a wheel, turning slowly, steadily, forever. The desert remained, the river remained. The houses of mud crumbled and were rebuilt. Fields were harvested and planted again, but the rhythm did not change. Centuries could pass, but the days felt the same, always the same. And in this endless repetition, there was peace. The people did not rush. They did not seek to break the pattern. They accepted the slowness, the sameness, the silence of the desert, and the calm of the river. The wind carried sand across the land, shaping dunes, erasing footprints, and still the people walked the same paths each day. The voices of ancestors faded, but the rituals continued. The monuments of stone rose slowly, but the daily life remained unchanged. Close your eyes again. Imagine the slow work of hands grinding grain. Imagine the steady flow of the river. Imagine the quiet of the desert night. Nothing changes quickly here. Nothing interrupts the rhythm. It is calm, it is steady, it is endless. The story flows on, like the river itself, never rushing, never ending, always the same. Now our journey through ancient Egypt is ending. You may let go of the words. Allow your thoughts to drift away and sink deeper into rest. The sands of Egypt are quiet now. The river flows slowly, and you may sleep. Good night.